Picture the best hunter in your camp. He's just walked back into the firelight dragging a huge antelope behind him, enough meat to feed everybody for days. He's sweating, grinning, waiting for the thanks he's earned. And the first person to see the kill looks it up and down, sniffs, and says, "This scrawny thing? You made us wait all day for a pile of bones? Well, I suppose we won't starve tonight, but don't expect me to enjoy it." Everyone laughs. Nobody claps him on the back. Nobody thanks him at all. And that insult is not an accident. It's a rule. Because here's the strange thing about the people you are descended from. For almost all of human history, there were no kings, no police, no presidents, no generals, no managers. Nobody who could give an order and simply expect it to be obeyed. So who was actually in charge of an ancient tribe? Who ran the band, settled the fights, decided when to move and where to hunt? The answer flips everything you assume about power upside down. It wasn't the strongest. It wasn't the loudest. And once you understand why, you will never look at your own boss or your own instincts the same way again. Let's start with a story you've been told your whole life, that humans are naturally ranked. We look at chimpanzees, our closest living cousins, and we see a brutal ladder. There's an alpha male at the top who bullied his way up. He takes the best food, the best mates, the best place by the tree. Everyone below him crouches, grovels, and waits for a chance to climb over him. It looks like nature's blueprint. Honestly, it looks a lot like us. So, for a long time, scientists assumed our earliest ancestors lived the same way. A big man at the top, everybody else underneath. It's the story every empire has ever told about itself. Somebody has to rule, so it might as well be the strong. But then anthropologists did something simple and radical. They went and actually lived with the last people on Earth who still feed themselves by foraging. The Juhohansi of the Kalahari Desert. The Hadza of Tanzania. The Mbuti deep in the Congo rainforest. Small bands who hunt, gather, and walk. The way every single human being lived for more than 95% of our time on this planet. And what they found was not a ladder at all. It was the opposite. These groups were fiercely, stubbornly, almost aggressively equal. But here's the part that should stop you cold. They weren't equal by accident. They weren't gentle, passive people who just happened to get along. They were equal on purpose. And they worked at it, every single day, on purpose. The man who put a name to this spent his career trying to explain it. His name was Christopher Boehm, an anthropologist who did something nobody had done before. He gathered the field reports on dozens and dozens of forager societies from all over the world and laid them side by side, looking for the pattern underneath. And the pattern was unmistakable. In band after band, on continent after continent, there was a fierce, shared hatred of bosses, not a mild dislike, a deep, active, organized refusal to let anyone rise above the group. Boehm gave it a name that sounds like a paradox, the reverse dominance hierarchy. Here's what he meant. In a chimp troop, the strong dominate the weak. That's an ordinary dominance hierarchy, power flowing downward from the top. But in a human forager band, Boehm realized, the whole thing is flipped. The many at the bottom gang up to dominate the one who tries to rise to the top. Power doesn't flow down from a ruler. It flows up from the group, and it's aimed at anyone who reaches for too much of it. In other words, there was still a hierarchy. There was still somebody being kept in their place. It just wasn't the weak. It was the would-be boss. Now think about how hard that actually is. You have no jails, no written laws, no army, no court, no throne to back up a decision. So how does a group with zero formal power keep an ambitious, aggressive man from taking over? They had a toolkit, and every tool in it was something you already use. The first weapon is mockery. This is the antelope story, and it comes straight from a real anthropologist named Richard Lee, who lived among the Juhohansi in the 1960s. Lee noticed that whenever a hunter brought back a big kill, the whole camp would tear it apart with insults. Too thin, too bony, barely worth carrying home, a pile of guts and ribs. It confused him, until an older man from the group finally explained it to him directly. When a young man kills much meat, the man said, he comes to think of himself as a chief or a big man, and he thinks the rest of us as his servants or inferiors. We can't accept this, so we always speak of his meat as worthless. This way we cool his heart and make him gentle. They called it insulting the meat, and it was deliberate. A great hunter is dangerous, not because he's cruel, but because success can go to a person's head. So the group pricks the balloon before it can inflate. They keep the skilled man skilled and useful, but never let him become their master. Praise, they understood, is how you build a king, so they refuse to hand it out. But mockery is only the gentle end of the toolkit. Because if a person doesn't get the hint, the group turns up the pressure, step by step, until it becomes something no one could survive. The next tool is gossip. In a small band, your reputation is everything, and it travels at the speed of a whisper. Let people talk about how greedy you are, how bossy, how full of yourself, and pretty soon nobody wants to share a fire with you. Boehm found gossip everywhere he looked, the invisible court where the whole group quietly judges you while you sleep. The next tool is disobedience. Try to give an order in a foraging band and watch what happens. Nothing. People simply don't do it. There is no punishment for ignoring you, because there is no throne behind your words. A leader who gives a command everyone quietly refuses to follow isn't a leader. He's just a man talking to himself. And if you still don't stop, if you keep grabbing, bullying, hoarding, threatening, the group climbs to the next rung. They stop cooperating with you altogether. Nobody shares meat with you. Nobody watches your children. In a world where survival depends completely on the people around you, being frozen out is a slow catastrophe. Then comes desertion. This is the quiet power of a group that can walk. If a man becomes unbearable, people don't need to fight him. They just pack up in the night and move the camp somewhere else, and leave the bully standing alone in an empty clearing. You can't rule people who have simply left. And at the very top of the ladder, in the rare cases where nothing else worked, sits the last and darkest tool. Boehm found it again and again in the record. The execution of the tyrant. A man who became a genuine danger to the group. A killer. A bully who wouldn't stop. Could be dealt with permanently. And often it was arranged so that no single person carried the blame. Sometimes the community chose a close relative of the offender to do it, so it couldn't spark a feud. The whole group, in effect, delivered the sentence. Mockery, gossip, disobedience, shunning, desertion, and, at the end, death. That was the machinery of the reverse dominance hierarchy. That is how people with no rulers ruled the ones who wanted to be rulers. So does that mean nobody led at all? That an ancient band was just a leaderless mob? No. And this is the part that matters most. There were leaders. There were absolutely people the group listened to. But their power came from a completely different place than we assume. Ask the Juhonsi or the Hadza who they respect, and they don't point to the strongest or the richest. They point to the generous one, the person who gives the most away and keeps the least. They point to the fair one, who settles arguments without taking sides. They point to the skilled one, the calm one, the one who tells the best stories, the one who stays level-headed when everyone else is panicking. The anthropologists have a clean word for what those people had. Not power, influence. The difference is everything. Power is when you can make people obey. Influence is when people choose to follow, and can stop choosing any time they like. A forager leader couldn't command anyone. He could only suggest, persuade, and set an example. And if the group disagreed, they simply ignored him, and he had no way to make them stop. So the currency of an ancient tribe was never force. It was respect. And respect had to be earned again and again, by giving, by fairness, by skill. The moment a respected person tried to convert that respect into control, the moment they started acting like a chief, the insults came out, the gossip started, and the leveling machine kicked in to pull them back down to size. And here's where the whole story turns over. We tell ourselves that history is the story of strong men rising, the biggest, the boldest, the most ruthless clawing their way to the top. That's how it's always been, we assume, all the way back to the beginning. Survival of the fittest. The alpha wins. But look again at what the foragers are actually showing us. For the vast majority of human existence, the bully did not win. The tyrant got overthrown. The man who tried to dominate was mocked, ignored, abandoned, and sometimes killed. The people who rose were the generous and the fair, and they rose only as high as the group allowed, and not 1 inch higher. Which means the instinct we think of as most natural, grab power, dominate, rule, is the exact instinct our ancestors spent thousands of generations training themselves to crush. We are not descended from the alphas. We are descended from the people who teamed up to take the alphas down. Boehm's word for this was almost gentle. He said these societies were run by a vigilant rank and file, ordinary people, watching, always watching, ready to unite the instant anyone reached too high. Equality, it turns out, was never the absence of a power struggle. It was a power struggle that the group had learned, permanently, to win. So sit with that the next time you feel it. That flush of irritation when a coworker gets too big for their boots. That itch to take down the arrogant one. That quiet satisfaction when a bragging, bullying somebody finally gets humbled in front of everyone. You've probably been taught that this is pettiness, a small, ugly, jealous feeling to be ashamed of. But it might be the oldest political instinct you own. It might be the thing that kept your ancestors free for 100,000 years, a built-in alarm that goes off the moment somebody reaches for too much power over you. The foragers didn't need police to stay equal. They had each other, and they had that feeling, and they were not afraid to use it. We built kings and bosses and presidents anyway. We handed the power up and let it stay there. And most of us spend our whole lives quietly obeying people we never actually agreed to obey. So here's the question worth sitting with. For almost all of human history, no one was allowed to rule you. That was the normal state of our species. Not the exception, but the rule. Somewhere along the way, we gave that up. The instinct to pull down the tyrant is still in you, right now, humming under the surface. So what, exactly, are you doing with it?